You don't quite remember when you first began to walk. Not really. There was only a sound, something light tapping against the damp stone at dawn, like old hooves clicking on a century that hadn't yet been named. One tap, then another, repeating, but uneven, as if time itself was learning how to step. At first, you thought it was a dream. Everything felt blurred, from the thin smoke rising from a wet mound of earth to the cold mist weeping into your open palm. No one was there. Nothing was. Only you. Hey guys, tonight we begin a story that never quite ended. A trail through silence, snow, and something ancient that still breathes beneath your skin. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing how far this travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. And so you step forward into a land with no name, where every grain of dust stuck to your heel feels like ash from a story no one ever told. The sounds all seem to pull away, making space for your heartbeat to echo in full. Loud, then low, then still. Like a breath caught in the throat of a fallen world. There's no path, not really, just traces. Impressions in moss, fading pressure where someone once leaned against stone. You place your hand where theirs might have rested and feel the damp residue of time forgotten. Your breath floats, your fingers ache. You adjust the folds of your cloak, though it does little against the cold wind that slices low through the valley. And still, that sound, like distant hooves behind you now. But when you turn, there's only white, mist, silence. The echo, it seems, is no longer following you. It is walking ahead, guiding perhaps, or reminding, or warning. Do you remember the sound of your father's footsteps on temple marble? The way they slowed, not from age but from knowing too much? That same rhythm beats now in your feet, heavy with inheritance, and the sky above, it doesn't judge. It watches, in silence, wide and gray, like an eye too tired to blink. You carry on. Somewhere far beneath the ice-worn cliffs, the memory of a name waits to be spoken again. But you won't speak it yet. Not until the wind turns warm. Not until the oil lamp in your pack stays lit. Not until the whisper you followed dares to stop walking. You still remember the way his eyes looked in the firelight. Not warm, no, but sharp, like bronze just out of the forge. They didn't blink often, didn't shift. They held you in place like a nail through parchment. You were small then, small enough to believe that eyes could promise things, small enough to think that silence meant safety. But that night, nothing felt safe. The fire crackled in the center of the chamber, not as heat, but as warning. And the shadows on the wall, they didn't move like shadows. They moved like watchers. You remember the texture of the floor, rough even though it had once been polished. Dust had settled into the carved lines, like a map worn out from being folded too often, until only the creases remained. You sat still, your legs tingled, but you didn't shift. You wouldn't give him that, and still he watched you. Not unkindly, but like a man measuring stone, as though deciding what kind of pillar you might one day become. Around you, the air held that mix of oil smoke, tanned leather, and something faint, something metallic. The scent of coin, perhaps, or blood. He lifted a scroll, let it fall again, said nothing. Just let the silence curl around your ribs like wire. Outside, Carthage was never truly dark. There was always torchlight, always footsteps, always the low murmur of ships being loaded. But in that room, it was another country, a colder one. Do you remember the weight of his ring? He never let you wear it, not until the day of the vow. But that night it was on the table between you, like a third presence, like a silent judge. You didn't dare reach for it. Not then. The ring had an engraving on the inner band, one you wouldn't read for years, one you would later carve, not into gold, but into the skin of every choice you made. His voice when it came was not loud, but it didn't need to be. Some voices carry the gravity of cities. There are lines, he said, that once crossed, redraw the world behind you. And you nodded, even though you didn't understand, because you had to, because not understanding wasn't an option. Because in that moment, you were already becoming more myth than boy, and myths don't ask for clarity. The lamp burned low. The coals whispered to each other in languages lost long before your time. He reached out, not to touch you, but to turn the blade resting on the table. Its edge caught the firelight. You saw your reflection in it, too young, too still, too eager. And beside that blade, a bowl of bitter herbs. You would taste them soon. Every child of the vow did. Bitterness, he said, teaches the tongue to remember. Sweetness only teaches it to forget. Your hand trembled. Only once, he noticed. Of course he did. But he said nothing, just pressed two fingers to the table and waited. The wood, carved with symbols worn thin from repetition, pressed patterns into your palm. You can still feel them, can't you? Even now. Even after all this. Even after snow and blood and silence beyond the Alps. The map may have faded, but the grooves remain in you. Outside, bells rang low from the harbor. A storm had turned. The sails would creak. You imagined them folding, heavy with salt and warning. But here, in this room, your storm had already arrived, and it had your father's eyes. Do you remember the last time he looked at you? Truly looked. Not with expectation, but with something softer. Maybe it never happened, or maybe it was too brief to name. But sometimes, in dreams, you think you see it, just for a breath, just before he turns away again. Now, as you walk through frost and silence, as the wind nips at the edges of a memory too large to hold, you realize it wasn't what he said that shaped you. It was the way the shadows never left his shoulders, even when the sun was full. You keep that with you, the weight of his ring, though it was never yours. The taste of the herbs, though you swallowed long ago. The edge of the blade, though you never bled then. All of it, packed into the folds of your cloak, stitched between the fibers of your name. And you walk, because standing still would mean hearing his voice again. And you're not ready for that. Not yet. Somewhere behind your eyes, the fire still crackles. Somewhere beneath your feet, the dust of that chamber still waits to rise. And somewhere, perhaps just ahead, the watchers on the wall lean forward, wondering what you've become. You held it once, only once, and even then, only after the ash had cooled. The urn was smaller than you expected, clay imperfect, with hairline cracks spidering out from the lip. Someone had tried to patch it once long ago with resin the color of dried honey. You ran your finger along the break, then opened it. Inside was dust, gray, silent, and the ring. No note, no name, just that worn band of metal curled among what might have been bones or bread or memory. You didn't speak, you didn't breathe for a long time. There are moments when even the wind holds still, waiting to see what you will become. The ring was heavy in your palm, not with mass, but with memory, as if it knew where it had been and refused to forget. You turned it once. Then again, your thumb traced the inside, found the faint groove of an inscription worn almost smooth. And though you couldn't read the letters, your skin did. Not in language, in weight, in warning. The ash clung to your fingers. You didn't wipe it off. You let it sit there like something sacred, or maybe shameful. Isn't that the difference, the things we honor and the things we hide? Sometimes they are one and the same. You turned to leave the chamber, but the light stopped you. Just a sliver from the high slit of a window, cutting through dust like a blade through silence. It lit the edge of the ring, and for a breath you saw not the urn, but a doorway. One you hadn't meant to find, one that opened anyway. Do you remember the first time you gave something up? Not by choice, but by necessity? A token, a piece of cloth, a name you never spoke again. This was like that. The ring was not yours, not truly, but in holding it, you knew something had passed to you. Not ownership, not even duty, just awareness that someone else's vow had not ended, only moved forward through you. You placed the ring in your pouch. You would not wear it, not yet. Some objects require silence before they can be accepted. Others demand it. Outside, the wind had shifted. You smelled smoke from far off, in not the sharp tang of firewood, but something older, drier, more final, like old parchment curling under heat, or the pages of a life being consumed word by word. You adjusted your cloak, tightened the cords, began walking again, though you didn't know why. There was no direction, only pull. The ash stayed on your fingers for days, even after washing, even after rain. You began to believe it had become part of you. Not a stain, a reminder. That all things burn eventually. That all things return to dust. That what we carry is never just weight, but the sound of a name whispered through time. That night you dreamt of a hill you had never climbed. At the top was a tree, gnarled and hollow, with an opening carved into the trunk. You stepped inside, and the world narrowed to a single breath. A lamp hung there, swinging, though there was no wind. Beneath it, the same ring. But this time it glowed. Not with fire, with memory. The kind that doesn't belong to you. The kind that uses you to remember itself. When you woke, your hands were empty, but the impression remained. The slight press of metal into skin. You sat up slowly. The mountains loomed ahead. The climb had not yet begun, and already your feet felt tired. Do you remember the day you stopped asking why? When the footsteps behind you became more comforting than the road ahead? You used to count your steps. Mark the days. Not anymore. Now you move as the dust moves. When stirred, when pushed, when the air itself calls your name. The ring is still with you. Wrapped now in cloth, tucked deep inside layers of worn leather and doubt. You haven't looked at it since. But it hums, not aloud, in your ribs, in the place behind your throat where words sometimes begin. You do not answer, but you listen. And when you cross the next ridge, when the world falls away into silence again, you find yourself touching your pouch without thinking. Just once. A check. A reassurance. Not that the ring is still there, but that you are. Because some things do not burn. Not entirely. They remain. In ash, in shape, in shadow. And so do you. You placed your hand on the wall and felt it crumble. Just slightly and under your touch. Not stone, not clay. Salt. Layered thick by wind and ritual. Hardened over years of sun and silence. Your palm came away dusted white. Fingers lined with the residue of vows you hadn't made yet. And as you looked at the streaks across your skin, it felt less like dust and more like warning. Like the wall had spoken, not in voice but in weight. They said it had been there for centuries. A marker, a threshold, a line between men and myths. No one told you what lay beyond it, only that to touch it was to choose. Not a future, but a forgetting, of comfort, of ease, of ever turning back. The salt stung your skin, not sharply, but persistently, as if it wanted to remind you that even the smallest burn leaves memory behind. You pressed harder. Let the grains dig into your palm, let them lodge into the soft creases you once used to hold bread, to trace stories in sand. And then, you spoke. Not loudly, just enough for the wall to hear. A single sentence, a promise made without witnesses. That's how real vows work, isn't it? The ones no one sees, the ones that echo longer because they have no form to bind them. Behind you, the sky was soft with dust light. Carthage lay distant, blurred, as if memory had already begun erasing its edges. You could still make out the harbor, the curve of sails waiting for wind, the silhouettes of workers tying up the day. But the moment you turned toward the wall again, all of it, city, sea, past, vanished into something quieter. You were alone with the salt, alone with what you had just said. Do you remember how your tongue felt dry after? How every word tasted like ash? That's how you knew it was done. Not because someone nodded, not because the air changed, but because your own body refused to carry comfort anymore. You had crossed, without ceremony, without audience, and the wall had accepted. You didn't look back. Later that night, you found yourself at the edge of a fire, not your own, someone else's. A traveler or a watcher, or perhaps a ghost. You sat on the other side, said nothing. The flames snapped gently, and the smoke rose straight. They offered no food, no question, just heat. And in the glow, you saw it, the same salt dust clinging to their sleeves. You realized you were not the first, not even close, but each vow, though shared, was solitary. Yours alone would carve its own wound. You slept beside that fire, dreaming of dry wind and shattered maps, of roads that didn't exist until someone walked them, of shadows shaped like thrones flickering behind crumbling curtains. And the wall, always the wall, standing in every direction. When you woke, the fire was out. The traveler was gone. Only footprints remained, half filled with sand. You pressed your fingers into them. The sand was warm, still holding breath. You let it go. There are things we vow that never get spoken again. Not because we forget, but because repetition would weaken them. You carry yours in silence. You carry it still. And that wall, it followed you, not literally, but in shape, in feel. Every time you reach a ridge, every time the trail narrows and the wind sharpens, there it is. That sensation, that fine sting of salt across the skin, that faint taste on your lips, that reminder that you are no longer free in the way you once were. You belong now, not to a person, not to a flag, but to a path. And a path does not bend for comfort. Do you remember what you gave up when you touched it? Not just ease, not just future, but your name too, or at least the version of it spoken by your mother's voice. Now your name lives in the dust, in the crackle of a campfire, in the hush before wind howls over exposed stone. You haven't spoken that name in years, but the wall remembers. And when your journey brings you again to the edge of something unnamed and the air grows quiet and the ground flattens beneath your weight, you'll know. You'll feel the salt again, beneath your feet, behind your eyes, and you will walk forward anyway. You found it beneath the woven mats in the old storeroom, buried under years of dust, moth-eaten linen, and broken reed baskets. You hadn't gone looking for it, not really, but the way your foot struck something hard in the dark, the way the air shifted, not colder, not warmer, but older, told you it had been waiting. You pulled it free, fingers stinging from the dry splinters of forgotten crates. It slid out like a breath drawn too slow, heavy and rimmed with dented brass. The leather straps had long since stiffened, but the scent hit you all at once. Not decay, not rust, but metal warmed by sun, sweat deep in the grain of wood, the sharp tang of brass that no cloth could bury. You held it close, not as weapon but as relic, something not meant to be used, only remembered. Your fingertips brushed across the edge, tracing the dents like braille from a war that no one recorded. Someone had fought with it, someone had bled onto it, someone had not returned. You felt it, the press of their story into your palms, as if the shield itself still carried the memory of weight in breath and last words never spoken aloud. It didn't shine, it didn't need to. There was no light in that room except what filtered through cracked slats in the ceiling. But the shield gleamed, faintly, in a way only old things can, as if time itself left fingerprints behind. You leaned in. You smelled it again, not with your dummy at the nose, but somewhere deeper, behind the throat, behind the ribs. That scent stayed. It clung. It whispered. Do you remember the first time you picked something up and knew it had a story longer than your own? Not a sword, not a scroll, just an object that felt heavier than it should be because it remembered, because it mourned. You didn't take it with you that day. You left it where it was. But that scent followed you. Into the corridor, onto the stairs, out into the blinding light of Carthage noon. It stayed in your cloak, in your skin. You couldn't scrub it off. Not truly, you stopped trying. That night, you dreamed of standing in a hall with no roof. The stars pressed low, watching. You held the shield again. But your hand was not your own. It was older, scarred, trembling. And across from you stood a boy, barefoot, thin, familiar. He raised his arms. You raised the shield. The wind began to sing. You woke with the scent still in your lungs. In the weeks that followed, you never spoke of it. Some things lose power when given voice. But you returned once, then again, just to look, just to remember that weight. You never moved it, never lifted it a second time. That would be too much, too final. Instead, you began to carry its memory, in the way you walked, in the way you stood at the edge of courtyards, listening for battles that had already ended, in the way you traced the curve of your own arm, wondering if it would ever be strong enough to block what was coming. You made no vow, not aloud, But you began to measure yourself against that forgotten warrior, not to become him, just to understand why the shield had been left behind, why it had not returned to the rack, why no one came to reclaim it. And later, years later, when the real shield was strapped to your back, iron newer than memory, leather still unwrinkled, you noticed it didn't smell like brass. It smelled like nothing, like emptiness, like a tool, not a witness. You wore it anyway, but in your mind, in your chest, it was the old one you bore. Do you remember the last time you passed through that corridor? The mats were gone, the crates removed, but you saw the dust where it had once lain, and you smelled it again, just briefly, as though something had stirred, as though you had not been forgotten. The shield is still there, not the object, the echo, in your stance, in your breath, in the pause before you take a step forward. And sometimes when you turn your head just right, you catch it, that scent, that brass, that warmth, and you remember what it means to carry something you did not earn and carry it anyway. It doesn't appear on any map, not even the old ones, the standards, the ones etched in cracked lacquer or scraped into dry animal hide. The valley is quiet, sunless, not for lack of light, but for something in the soil itself that seems to drink shadows and leave everything the same shade of gray. You didn't mean to find it. The path simply leaned that way, and your feet, already aching from miles of doubt, obeyed. The grass there was brittle, not dead, not quite, but exhausted. Every blade felt like it had bent to the wind too many times, and now refused to rise again. The air was still, not with peace, with pause, like the world itself was waiting. Not for you, just waiting. You stepped in with care. Heel first, then toe. The soil gave slightly as if remembering weight. You looked back, not out of hesitation, but to see if your footprints remained. They didn't. Already the ground had swallowed them, as if the valley refused to acknowledge passage. Your breath slowed. It had to. The silence was so thick that even a sharp inhale felt like offense. So you matched the rhythm of the land, quiet, slow, deliberate. A kind of walking prayer. Each movement a request. May I enter? May I be nothing? May I pass? Do you remember that pressure in your chest? Not fear. Reverence. The way one feels when standing near something ancient, unspoken and vast. Like ruins too old for names. Or bones too sacred to bury. You felt it then, in your ribs, in your knees, in the arch of your back. The sense that the valley was not empty, just uninterested in being known. There were no birds, no insects. Even your own thoughts felt hushed, like they too had removed their sandals. You touched the hilt at your side, not in readiness, but in habit, and for the first time it felt unnecessary. Not useless, just misfit, like laughter in a temple. You passed a cairn, small, round, stones stacked without urgency, yet impossibly steady. Not a marker, a memory. You knelt beside it, not to pray, just to listen. The stones were cool, not from shade, but from absence. You touched the top one and felt something there. Not a voice, but a question. A soft tug behind your navel. Why are you here? You had no answer. And still you walked. Hours or perhaps minutes passed. Time in that place folded differently. It didn't slip forward. It gathered. Thick. Heavy. You felt it in your steps. The slow drag of everything that came before you pooling at your heels. Do you remember how the sweat on your back didn't dry? How your palms stayed damp even in the cold? You found a tree near the center. Leafless. Not dead. Its bark was smooth like water-worn bone, and from one of its bare limbs a thread hung, frayed, swaying, red. You didn't touch it. You knew better. Some things are not meant for hands, only for remembering. You sat there, at the base, let your spine align with its trunk, close your eyes, and for a moment it felt as if the valley breathed in and held you there, not captured, not claimed, just held. And in that stillness, the first step truly began. Because up until then, it was movement without meaning, marching, fleeing, drifting. But now, in that pause, something inside you shifted. not dramatically. Quietly, a slight tilt, like a key turning just enough to unlock a door you hadn't seen. You felt the weight of the ring in your pouch, the memory of the wall, the scent of brass, the scrape of salt across your tongue. They all met here, not to speak, but to listen with you. You opened your eyes. The valley was the same, but you weren't. You stood, not quickly, with respect, as if asking permission. There was no answer, and yet, you knew the thread above you swayed once more. A breath, a known, or maybe just wind. You walked forward, and though you didn't look back, you knew this time your footsteps would remain. You unrolled it slowly, careful not to tear what was already torn. The edges flaked like dried leaves, and a rip near the center forked outward, jagged like a lightning strike frozen in parchment. This wasn't just wear, it felt deliberate, as if the map had broken open to reveal something it could no longer contain. You ran your fingers along the crease, tracing it without knowing why. The crack didn't follow the lines of land or sea. It carved across borders, slicing through cities, mountains, names. As if to say, none of this is certain. The ink had faded, not evenly. Some places were still bold, the names of empires long silent, rivers that might no longer flow. But other parts had gone pale, as if memory itself had grown shy. The paper smelled of old oil, dust, and something sweeter, almost like crushed flowers, dried and forgotten between pages. You brought it closer, breathed it in, and in that moment you remembered something. Not a place, a feeling. The sense of standing at a crossroads you didn't recognize, your feet unsure, your hands too full of future to carry doubt. You never knew who drew it. Maybe no one did. Maybe it drew itself, slowly, across years and hands and misremembered directions. Some of the symbols were familiar. Others felt like guesses or prayers. You didn't need to understand them. You only needed to feel where the lines hesitated. That's where truth lives. Not in precision, but in pause. Do you remember the first time you questioned the map? Not because it was wrong, but because it didn't tremble when you did. You wanted it to breathe, to shift, to acknowledge the storm ahead. But it stayed still, and in that stillness, you realized the map wasn't a guide. It was a witness. The crack widened slightly under your thumb, just enough to see the thread beneath, a second layer of parchment, thinner, stitched to the back. You hadn't noticed it before. You peeled it gently, revealed a set of marks not meant to be seen. Red lines, circles, crossed out names. One, near the top edge, had your name beside it, not written in ink, carved, as if someone had etched it with the edge of a nail or a blade dulled by repetition. The letters were shallow, but they burned. You folded the map carefully, not to protect it, to keep it from seeing too much. You slid it into your pack, but it didn't rest quietly. Its corners stuck out, its weight uneven. A reminder always that knowing where you are does not mean knowing where you're going. Later, under a tree hollowed by age and thunder, you laid it out again, tried to align it with the stars above. But the sky did not match the page. You tilted the map, then your head, then your breath. Nothing helped. Nothing aligned. And then you stopped. You stopped trying to make it fit. You turned the map slowly until the crack, that fault line, pointed north, or what you thought might be north. And in that moment, the wind changed. It wasn't an answer, it was a nudge. And that was enough. You traced the crack again. Let it guide your eyes instead of the lines. It led you not to a city, not to a name, but to a blank space. Empty, soft, like untouched snow. That was where you were meant to go. Not because the map said so, but because the map gave up. Because sometimes the place that forgets to be drawn is the only place you can belong. And so you packed it again. Folded not by compass, but by instinct. A different crease, a new shape. You tucked it deeper this time, closer to your ribs, not to protect it, but to remind yourself that certainty is not survival. The crack remains, always. A tear in the idea of direction. A wound you carry not in flesh, but in orientation. And sometimes when you close your eyes, you see it again. That red line, that shallow carving, your name beside it. But now, when you see it, you don't flinch. You step. You heard them before you saw them. The slow, uneven press of weight on soil, the groan of wooden harnesses, the soft grunt of flesh remembering war. Not many, fewer than stories would claim. Their shadows stretched long in the morning light, strange and slow like thoughts that take years to arrive. They were not majestic. They were not symbols. They were tired. Their feet sank deep into the pathless earth, and where they passed, the ground stayed indented, not just physically, but spiritually, as if they pressed a kind of sorrow into the world with each step. You watched them move, one behind another, quiet, enormous, ancient. Their eyes met yours, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as though they'd seen your shape before, long ago, carved into a cave wall, half faded by smoke and time. The closest one carried no rider, only a torn cloth draped along its side marked with smears that might once have been a crest. Now it bore no meaning, only color, a red so dark it looked black in shadow. Its ears flicked, its breath clouded in the cold. You stepped aside. It passed. Do you remember the first time something larger than you made space for you? Not because it had to, because it chose to. There's a kind of reverence in that, a kind of mercy, one you don't earn, only receive. You walked with them for a time, not behind, letting their path smooth yours. Their presence pushed silence ahead like a tide. Birds fell quiet, trees bent. Even the wind moved around them in loops, as if unsure whether to bow or flee. Their backs bore supplies, carved crates, half-broken barrels lashed with rope. But there was something else too, something unspoken, a kind of weight that wasn't visible. Memory. You could feel it from where you walked. Grief pressed into hide. Hope stretched thin across bone. Names carried in the sway of their shoulders. They knew things, not in words, in movement, in rhythm, in the way their trunks occasionally brushed the ground like someone touching a grave. You saw one pause. It lowered its head toward a rock. Not a large one, just smooth, round, unremarkable. It touched it once, twice, then moved on. And you wondered, had it been there before? Had it touched that stone in another lifetime? Or was it simply teaching you that some things should be acknowledged, even when nameless? You never asked why they followed you. Or maybe you were following them. It didn't matter. The direction was mutual. The air changed when they were near, denser, slower. Time took longer to pass as if it, too, carried a burden it could not put down. That night they settled in a circle, tusks gleaming faint under moonlight, eyes half closed but never asleep. You didn't sleep either. You watched their breath rise and fall, and for a moment you matched your own to theirs. Inhale, hold, release. Inhale, hold. And as if breath alone could bridge the distance between skin and memory. Do you remember when you stopped thinking of them as beasts? When they stopped being animals and became echoes? When their silence spoke more than your questions ever could? One of them limped. You hadn't noticed before. A hind leg dragged slightly, not enough to halt it, just enough to change the sound of its steps. You began to time your own stride to that rhythm, a lopsided cadence. It felt right, honest, as if the road should carry an imperfection. In the morning they left before you. No sound, no cue, just gone. You found only the wide, round prints and the deep smell of soil stirred by weight and time. You placed your hand in one of those prints. It covered your fingers, your palm, your wrist. You pressed deeper until your skin touched cool earth, and you closed your eyes. Something passed through you then, not knowledge, not vision, just weight. A soft, steady pressure behind the sternum, a knowing that you would carry what they carried, not the load, but the imprint, the shadow of their presence. And as you stood again, brushing dirt from your knees, you realized they had not left you behind. They had given you permission to continue. You didn't fall asleep. Sleep fell onto you, slow and heavy, like snow on stone. One moment you were blinking against the wind, the next your eyes no longer stung. The cold saddle beneath you became the only anchor left in a world blurred by silence and muscle ache. Your hands still held the reins, loosely, not to guide, to remember. The leather had stiffened with frost. It cracked when you flexed your grip, the sound brittle, like bones trying to recall their shape. The animal beneath you shifted, a slow, pulsing warmth moving forward, step by step, while your body drifted backward, inward, somewhere else. The dream didn't begin like a story. It began like breath, thin, whispered, a smell of cypress bark and old parchment. You were in a room, perhaps, though it had no walls, just long pillars of smoke that swayed like trees in windless air. On a table, was it stone, wood, lay a bowl filled with small silver rings. Each one had a name scratched faintly along the inside. None of them were yours. But one called to your hand anyway. You reached, not because you wanted it, because you already had. Your fingers slid inside the bowl and came back out holding a ring that wasn't metal. It was light, hollow, almost soft. You turned it over. The letters weren't visible. They were felt, etched into your fingerprints like regret. You tried to slip it on, but it vanished before it reached your knuckle. You woke with your fingers curled tightly, the imprint of reins biting into your palm, still moving, still cold, still alone except for the slow rhythm of hooves and breath in mist. Do you remember the first time a dream stayed with you? Not as image, but as texture. That hollow feeling behind the sternum, that almost sound you hear just before waking. This was one of those. You couldn't speak it, couldn't write it. You could only carry it the way one carries a secret, not because it must be hidden, but because it would lose meaning if explained. The road narrowed, not because of terrain, because the sky pressed lower and the air thickened with waiting. The kind of quiet that feels shaped, like a bowl carved to hold a single answer. And you didn't have one. Only questions. The kind that arrived as memories with no origin. The kind that whispered, was this always the way? Or what did you leave behind that still waits for you? You passed a shrine, just stones, no name, no offering. But someone had once placed a cloak there, folded, dry, untouched by snow or rot. You stopped, looked at it, felt the saddle creak beneath you, and for a long time you did nothing. Then you reached down, not to take it, but to touch it. Your glove met fabric. Dry, yes, but also warm, impossibly warm, like it had been waiting for you, or had never left you. You didn't put it on, you let it be. That night the wind did not blow, but the fire danced anyway, as if something unseen breathed near it. You watched sparks rise and vanish into a sky without stars. And behind your eyes the ring pulsed again, not physically, but rhythmically, the dream returning in pieces. A scent. A word you almost understood. A shadow shaped like someone you forgot. You lay on your side, back to the flame, and let the cold saddle blanket curl around your knees. The horse, still tethered, shifted once, then stilled. And in that stillness, you felt the road stretch ahead, and dark and unwritten. You did not fear it, but neither did you welcome it. You simply prepared. And when dawn finally brushed the sky in faint iron hues, you stood without sound, touched your pouch, touched your saddle, touched your throat, where the words had never formed. Then you mounted again and rode into the frost. You slipped into the hollow without knowing why. A dip in the mountainside barely wide enough to pass through sideways. The stone around it was smooth, not worn but chosen, as if the wind had pulled its fingers along the same groove for centuries and in that repetition, carved an invitation. You ducked beneath the arch. Your pack scraped rock. The silence inside was immediate, whole, the kind that arrives not from absence but from reverence. You didn't speak, you didn't need to. The ground sloped inward. Each step echoed, but only in your chest. No sound returned from the walls. Only pressure, like being watched by something too old to blink. The hollow wasn't a cave, it was a breath. One drawn and never let go. You lit no flame, the light would have felt too loud. Instead, you waited. Let your eyes adjust to the cool gloom, the air thick with mineral and memory. You sat, back against stone, legs folded beneath your cloak. And then you saw it, not clearly. The moon didn't shine in. It hovered above the entrance, diffused by mist, framed by the arch like a coin placed on an altar. But it was enough. You could see its shape, slightly off, slightly wrong, as if something had scraped its surface in your sleep. Do you remember the first time the moon felt unfamiliar? Not distant, but altered, as if it remembered something you didn't. You stared too long, felt the skin behind your ears tighten. You blinked. The moon stayed, watching. The hollow had no carvings, no markings, just texture, as if whatever had once lived here had chosen to leave nothing but shape behind. You ran your hand along the wall. Cold, damp, then warm, not temperature, sensation. You pulled your hand back. There on your palm, dust, but not gray, gold, faint, almost imagined. You rubbed your fingers together. The dust shimmered, then vanished. You stayed still. You don't know for how long. Time thinned in that place like the edge of sleep, flexible, uncertain, soft. Your breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the stone. You counted heartbeats between echoes, found none, and still you felt it. The presence, not threatening, not kind, just waiting. You whispered then, not to speak, to be heard. A single phrase. You don't remember the words, only the way they tasted, like metal cooled too fast, like water from a jar left open too long. The hollow heard, and it didn't answer. But it changed. A draft curled through the chamber. No sound, no source, just movement. Your hair lifted slightly. The edge of your sleeve flicked, and above the moon dimmed, not hidden, not obscured, just lessened, as if it too had bent its head. You stood, slowly, let your knees complain, let your back stiffen. You stepped forward, reached the entrance, and looked out. The world had shifted, not in color, not in situation, in quiet. Everything, the trees, the stone, even the stars, seemed to lean slightly away, giving you space. Or perhaps making room for something that followed you out. You didn't question it. You stepped forward, felt the outside air press against your chest like welcome and warning at once. You looked up again. The moon was gone. Not behind cloud, not vanished, just missing. And you remembered. Not all lights return the same way. You tightened your cloak, placed a hand on the stone behind you one last time. It was dry now and cold, and gold no longer clung to your skin. But beneath your nails, faint, nearly forgotten, was the shimmer of something that hadn't quite let go. You don't know which you crossed it, the line, the height, the threshold. There is no arch, no marker, no sudden change in the air to announce a passage between worlds. Only the shift in your breath, thinner now, edged with the cold clarity of altitude. One moment, the wind carried the salt sting of the lower valleys. The next, it carried nothing at all. Silence settled in your lungs like ash. The Alps do not rise. They emerge, they do not welcome. They reveal. Slopes become walls, and then those walls narrow into clefts carved by centuries of unremembered movement. Water, ice, fear. Your boots no longer press into soil. They press into compressed centuries. Frozen breath, crushed hope. The invisible bones of those who came before and did not descend. Beneath the crust of snow, the earth groans. Not loud, but low. The kind of groan that hides under the surface of a dream. Still you move forward. You noticed it first on the ridge above you. A sliver of darker gray, thin and quivering like smoke caught between two layers of air. Not your shadow, not cast by you. It moved as you did, but not quite in time. It hesitated when you stepped, advanced when you paused. It bent where the land did not. At first you ignored it. There were more urgent concerns. The fraying leather of your gloves, the crack beginning to split your lower lip, the way your left shoulder no longer lifted quite evenly. But it remained, not behind you, not ahead, beside you, sometimes above. Do you remember the first time something watched you without eyes? When you felt the pressure of attention but no source? This was like that. You slowed, not out of caution, out of reverence. Something had followed you through the pinches, or perhaps it had waited here all along. The wind shifted. You smelled nothing, heard nothing, but still you tasted something at the back of your throat, copper and burned pine. the scent of old sacrifices. You pressed onward. The terrain grew brittle. Stone cracked beneath your feet like glass under frost. Your breath came in shallow pulls. The sky above had narrowed, dimmed, as if reluctant to shine on this part of the path. You passed a cairn, then another. Some tumbled, some intact, none familiar. They weren't markers, they were remains. The shadow moved closer. You turned once, slowly, hoping to catch it outright, like one might trap a lie between teeth. But there was nothing. Only your own shape cast against a ridge to the left. Normal, expected. And yet, it still felt as if something walked beside you. You began to match your steps to its rhythm. Not out of fear, out of courtesy. Some ghosts don't haunt, they accompany. And this one, whatever it was, kept a pace that suggested memory, not malice. A patch of ice gave beneath your boot. You stumbled, caught yourself on a jagged stone, tore your glove. Your palm opened. Blood bloomed slowly, dark in the thin air. You expected the pain. What surprised you was the warmth. The sting brought clarity. You looked down and saw that the blood had fallen not onto stone, but onto another print. Large, blurred, elephantine. It had not been there moments before. It faced forward. You placed your hand against it. The blood steamed faintly. The print felt warm beneath the frost. You didn't move for a long time. When you finally stood, the wind had stilled. You could hear your own pulse again. And above you, on the ridge, the shadow no longer hid. It stood, tall, unmoving, your shape, not your shape, a silhouette made of absence, a figure built from everything that silence forgets. It didn't speak, it didn't beckon, but you understood. This was not a guide, it was a mirror, a reminder that some parts of you had already crossed long before your feet did. Do you remember what it felt like to realize you were no longer alone? Not because someone joined you, but because something inside you had finally caught up. The descent began soon after, slippery, relentless. The snow no longer cushioned your steps. It whispered beneath them, the kind of whisper that makes stone think of falling. You gripped the reins tighter, though no beast pulled you now, only memory. The shadow did not follow. It remained at the summit, watching. And as you stepped downward, breathless, trembling, tired, you felt the last of its presence slip behind you, like a hand brushing your shoulder in parting. You didn't look back. Some thresholds are crossed only once, and some cross you. You find the stone not by sight but by weight, a pull beneath your feet that deepens with each step, a heaviness in the air that thickens behind your ribs. It isn't marked, it doesn't shine. It waits in a curve of the pass where the wind loses its voice, where even birds hesitate to cross. It stands half sunk into the slope, large enough to lean against, small enough to miss if you aren't meant to find it. But you are, and it knows. The surface is rough, veined with cold, but there's a groove where hands have pressed before you. It isn't visible, only felt. You kneel and lay your palm to the stone. Nothing happens, not at first. Then slowly, almost shyly, the rock begins to hum beneath your skin. Not vibration, not sound, but memory. You close your eyes, your breath slows. The stone exhales. A windless warmth radiates from its heart, wrapping around your fingers like a question you've never dared to ask aloud. It breathes, not with lungs, but with time. You feel layers beneath your hand. Moss that once grew here and died. Names once spoken and forgotten. Battles buried beneath lichen and snow. You stay still, let it speak, though it never uses words. Its language is pressure, a pulse against your bones, slow and deliberate, a rhythm older than light. You lean your forehead to it. The cold startles, then soothes. And in that moment, your thoughts stop reaching forward. They sink. Do you remember the first time a place looked through you? Not past you, not around you, through you. This stone does. It does not judge, but it remembers everything. The story of your footsteps is already inside it. It presses back against your weight with quiet recognition. The past is not gone here. It is folded, layered, compacted like the snow that covers the trail behind you. You know instinctively that this is not the first time your bloodline has touched this stone, perhaps not even the second. You wonder, did your father place his hand here once? Did his father before him? Did they feel the same aching hush in their chest, the same tingling behind the eyes, the same impulse to remain silent, not out of fear, but respect? You take a breath, and the stone answers by not answering, the way an old teacher does, offering no clarity, only space. You feel your heartbeat slow to meet the earth's. You feel your memories reorder themselves. You remember the fire from last night, the curve of red on pale leather, the limp of an elephant, the dream of smoke pillars and silver rings. All of it settles now, sifted into the hollows of your muscles like silt beneath water. Time passes differently while you touch the stone. You don't know how long you remain. Your knees ache, your fingers numb, but still you do not move. Around you the wind picks up again, brushing across your shoulders, through your hair, and when you open your eyes the light has shifted. Dusk now, or nearly. The sun angled low, gold leaking across the pass like spilled oil. You stand slowly, press your hand one last time to the groove. You don't say goodbye. The stone would not acknowledge it. Farewells are for things that end. The stone has never ended. It simply waits. You step back and notice the impression left in your skin. Faint, but there. Like the curl of a vine. Like the outline of something you were meant to carry. And you do. You wrap your hand in cloth, but still the warmth lingers. Still the pressure sits behind your ribs, just beneath your breath. You walk forward with less haste, not because you are slower, because you are not alone. Something walks with you now, not beside, not behind, within, a weight without burden, a presence without name. Do you remember the stone in dreams you never told anyone about? The one that sang in silence? The one that turned when you walked past it, just slightly, like it was listening? This was that stone. And now, so are you. You found it wrapped in 3 layers of cloth, each one more brittle than the last. The outer fold cracked as you opened it, seams breaking into flakes of threadbare wool and wind-blown dust. Beneath that, a thinner weave, smoother, older, dyed once in blue, but now faded into the color of clouded water. You hesitated at the last layer, not because you feared what it held, because something in your chest had already begun to tighten, as if the breath waiting inside the bundle was not your own. You pulled it open slowly. Pale leather, soft as whispering skin unfolded in your hands. It wasn't parchment. It wasn't armor. It was something in between, a relic made not to be worn or read, but remembered. Across the center, a single mark, red, not drawn, not spilled, burned. The edges of it had curled slightly inward, as if the leather itself had recoiled when the symbol first touched it. A circle broken at the top, a vertical line through its heart. Simple, striking. It wasn't decorative, it was a brand. And the moment your eyes met it, your fingers stopped moving. The symbol meant nothing to your mind, but your body knew it. Your tongue went dry, your shoulders tensed. You felt your heartbeat echo in your teeth. It wasn't fear, it wasn't reverence, it was recognition from somewhere too deep to name. You traced the edge with your index finger. Slowly. The mark did not rise from the leather. It pulsed and twatted, warm though the air around you had turned cold. Your fingertip tingled. You pulled away, rubbed your fingers together. The feeling remained. Not heat. Memory. Do you remember the first time an object looked back at you? Not literally, just spiritually. When it carried something that pressed against your breath and said, I remember you, even if you've forgotten me. This was that moment. You sat back on your heels, leather across your knees, the firelight flickering quietly to your left. The forest beyond had gone still. No wind, no crack of wood, just the long hum of knowing settling into your muscles. You looked closer. Around the edges of the mark, the leather bore faint indentations, circles, douys, a curve like a crescent moon. Not symbols, scars. It had once been bound, maybe worn, maybe held tightly enough for long enough to reshape its surface. You imagined a chest, a back, a shoulder. Someone carrying it not for protection, but for remembrance. A banner turned inward, a vow pressed against skin. You tilted it toward the fire. The mark caught the light and glowed, not brightly, but with depth, like coals beneath ash. The red darkened, deepened, became something more than color. It became weight. You turned it again. The glow faded, but your breath didn't slow. You rolled it up gently. You could not leave it open. You didn't wrap it tight. That would feel like binding something alive. You folded it with care, like tucking a child into sleep. And when it was done, you set it beside the fire, not too close, just close enough for the shadows to reach it. That night, you didn't sleep, not fully. The leather pulsed in the dark, not physically, but through your spine, your throat, your pulse. You closed your eyes and dreamed, not in images, but in temperature. Smoke warm, ember hot, the smell of iron and crushed roots. Voices, low, not whispering, chanting, not words, sounds, old syllables worn smooth by centuries of repetition. You didn't understand, but your breath fell into rhythm with theirs. You woke with your hand over your heart and ash on your fingers. The leather hadn't moved, but the mark, it looked darker now, as if it had drawn something from the night, or perhaps from you. Do you remember the way certain names catch in the mouth? Not because they're difficult to say, but because something in your throat doesn't want to release them. You don't know the name of the mark, but you know it shouldn't be spoken. Not yet. You tied the leather shut, slid it into your pack. You felt its presence behind your ribs for hours after. It made you walk slower, not from burden, from awareness. And once, near a bend in the trail, you caught sight of something red in the snow. Just a flicker, like paint, like blood. You stepped closer. It was nothing. Just a patch of bark stained by frost rot. But for a moment, you saw the mark again. Exactly. Burned into the forest floor. You didn't speak. You kept walking. Some symbols don't need interpretation. They are reminders, not of what is ahead, but of what watches from behind. And the red mark? It watches still. The wind doesn't announce itself. It arrives sideways, slipping between folds of your cloak, beneath your collar, behind your ears, in places you thought protected. It doesn't howl. It rasps, as if the very air had spent centuries brushing against ancient teeth, stone relics ground down to whispers. It carries dust, but not the kind that stings the eyes. This dust clings to memory, to regret, to the thin crease between breath and thought. You stand at the lip of the valley, and it presses into you like a hand from behind, urging you forward, not with force, but with familiarity. You've been here before, not in body, in story, in warnings, in lullabies that ended too soon. The valley stretches below you like a discarded cloak, wide, soft-looking, and wrong. It folds in on itself unnaturally, like someone had wrapped it hastily around something that no longer breathes. No trees, no birds, just contours. Earth rising where it shouldn't. Shadows cast by nothing visible. You shift your weight, feel the wind slide down your spine. Your boots crack a thin crust on the rock beneath. Not ice. Something older. Salt, maybe, or time. Do you remember the first place that made you question silence? Not because it lacked sound, but because the sound it offered didn't belong to you. This valley hums. Not loud, not constant, just beneath the ribs. A vibration in the bone that tells you not to speak. You obey, not out of fear, out of instinct. You descend carefully. There's no trail, only soft depressions in the ground, as if others had passed here on bare feet, long ago without needing to leave more than impressions. You follow the shapes, they guide, but don't lead. Your body grows lighter, not from joy, from erosion. The weight that once pressed into your shoulders dissolves slowly into the air around you, and with it, something slips out of your memory. A name, a face, you try to grasp it. But the harder you focus, the more it fades, like fog around a hand. You are being rewritten. At the base, a single rock juts upward like a vertebrae from a buried beast. On it, a strip of cloth, weathered, bound tight around the middle, a knot too intricate to unravel. You crouch beside it, fingers hovering, unsure whether to touch. You don't. Instead, you lean close and inhale. The scent catches you off guard. It's not decay, not earth. It's a smell you haven't known in years. The exact scent of the hall outside your father's chamber. Incense burned too long, mingled with oiled leather and paper stored in boxes no one opened anymore. Your eyes sting. The wind doesn't stop. It carries the scent further, around you, into you, like a secret returning home. You sit. There is no time here. The sky above remains unchanged, a flat sheet of gray. The valley holds you in place, not like a cage, but like a vow. You don't think. You don't plan. You listen. The wind whispers now in circular rhythm. It pulls at your pack, lifts your cloak, brushes your hair aside, and for a moment it almost speaks. Just one word, but you miss it, or choose not to hear. Do you remember when you stopped needing answers? When the question itself became enough? You remain seated until your legs go numb. The stone at your side hums with stored warmth. The cloth tied around it does not move. You wonder, was it tied for someone else? Or is it yours, placed long ago by a version of yourself you haven't yet become? You rise, slowly, muscles reluctant, air tighter now. You don't look back. There's no need. The valley has taken what it needed, not blood, not tears, just a layer of your certainty, peeled back so gently you didn't notice until it was gone. The wind pushes you forward. It does not stop. You find it by accident, or maybe it finds you, hidden behind a low ridge and a knot of trees twisted so tightly they seem to breathe together. The well is almost entirely lost beneath vines and collapsed stone. No rope, no bucket, just a ring of moss-covered rock and the hollow breath of something deep, unseen. You don't hear it, you feel it. A quiet that hums below sound, vibrating faintly in the soles of your feet, like memory murmuring through the bones of the earth. You kneel beside it. The stone is slick beneath your palm, not with moisture, but with time. It leaves a faint trace on your skin, a green-gray smear that smells of lichen, rust, and something almost sweet. Not flowers. Paper, ball paper, the kind buried at the bottom of a wooden chest, still holding the echo of ink. You peer in. No bottom, no reflection, only shadow, only depth. You drop a stone, small, smooth. It falls in silence. No splash, no knock, only the sound of absence becoming permanent. You close your eyes, listen harder. Still nothing. Do you remember the first time you looked into something deeper than understanding?
Above his famine,
A cave, a fire, the eyes of someone you loved. This is that same depth, but colder, hungrier. The well does not reach out. It waits. You sit beside it. You place your hand on the rim and let your thoughts loosen. Not escape, unravel. One by one, they drift from your grip like threads in water. You don't pull them back. You watch them fall inward. You think of names, yours, others. All the words you've tried not to forget. All the ones you've refused to remember. They slide from memory into shadow. A breeze moves behind you, not cold, not warm, just still. It does not ruffle the trees. It does not stir your hair. It feels like an exhale, not yours. You reach into your cloak, pull out the leather bundle. The red mark burned into its skin seems dimmer now, as if it too recognizes this place, as if it has been here before, or came from here. You place the leather gently on the stone ring. You don't open it. You don't need to. Something inside the well responds, not with movement, with silence thick enough to push against your skin. You speak, just one sentence. You don't know why. You don't remember deciding. The words leave your mouth before you think them. They land in the well and vanish. Not echoed, not swallowed, absorbed. You feel lighter. You feel hollow. You feel seen. There is no voice in return, no vision. But something shifts behind your eyes. A memory surfaces, one you never lived. A child standing at this very rim, placing something wrapped in cloth into the dark. The same knot, the same red. You blink, the image fades. But your chest tightens, not in fear, in longing, for something you do not know, for someone you may have been. You gather the leather again, tie it slowly, deliberately, press it against your chest. Your pulse rises to meet it. You stand. Do you remember the last time you left something behind on purpose? Not lost, not forgotten, given. This feels like that, only in reverse, as if something long buried has risen to find you again. You step away from the well, you do not look back. You know it will still be there, and somehow, you know you will return. You unfold the map again, though you already know what it will show. You've traced its lines so many times, the creases have become wounds, soft and darkened from sweat, pressure, time. The ink, once crisp and deliberate, now bleeds at the edges. Roads blur into rivers. Borders collapse into hills that never existed. Still you open it, kneel beside a flat patch of earth, anchor the corners with stone, and stare. It doesn't match, not even close. The mountain pass you just crossed isn't marked. The valley you lingered in, the one with the cloth and the hum, is only an empty space where two ridgelines should meet. The forest appears elsewhere entirely, like a memory misfiled. And where you now sit, beneath a cliff that breathes cold onto your shoulders, the map shows a ruin, a square of ink labeled with a name too smudged to read. You rub your thumb across it. The paper softens, then tears slightly. You exhale, not frustration, something older, like disappointment in something you once trusted. Do you remember the first thing you ever believed without question? Maybe it was a story, a person, a rule. This map was that once, an anchor, and now it trembles when you hold it, like it knows it's become a relic of a version of the world that no longer exists. You close your eyes, try to recall what path brought you here, but the steps feel warped, repeated, as though you've taken this trail more than once, as though the map did align, just in a different life. You shake the thought, but it lingers, like smoke and fabric. You reach for your pack, pull out a small charcoal nub. You hesitate, then begin to redraw. Not the whole thing, just a portion. The valley, the stone, the well, the shadow that stood on the ridge. Each line comes slower than the last, not from doubt, from reverence. You aren't drawing terrain, you're acknowledging memory. The wind catches one edge. You press it back down, but something inside you shifts. You realize you are not correcting the map. You are creating a new one that can't be shared. Not because it's secret, because it's alive. And like all living things, it changes depending on who looks. You add the symbol, that's the red mark, into the corner near the pass. You don't know what it marks. You only know it belongs there. As soon as the charcoal touches the parchment, you feel it again, that deep sensation behind your ribs, like a breath held too long, like a word not spoken. The paper darkens slightly where you draw, as if the ink seeps deeper than it should. You pull back. The map stares up at you. Still a map, but less a guide, more a mirror. You see not destinations, but decisions. Not landmarks, but echoes. Do you remember making a map of your room when you were small? Drawing the things that mattered? The corner where dreams gathered? The floorboard that creaked secrets? The drawer where letters you never sent still waited? This is that map now, but stretched across a country of ghosts. You fold it gently. Slower than before, as if the paper might speak if bent too fast. You slide it back into the pack. It rests differently now, not flat. It carries weight. In silence, you stand. You don't check direction. You don't need to. The path ahead is no longer on the map, but it is clear. It begins with a breath, and it waits for you to take it. You see it only when the fog thins, a low arch of stone half sunken into the hill, almost indistinguishable from the crags around it, but not quite. Something in its curve catches your eye. Not beauty, not symmetry, a flaw, a hairline fracture that runs from the apex down its left side, like a vein of lightning frozen in stone. You walk toward it without speaking, without knowing why. The grass grows thicker here, pale and silvery, as if light has touched it differently for years. You step carefully. Each blade folds silently beneath your feet. The arch is taller than you imagined. Not grand, but deliberate. No symbols, no carvings. Just that crack, running down and vanishing into the earth. You reach up, lay your hand against the stone. It's dry, but beneath your fingertips, a faint vibration, like breathing, not constant, subtle. The kind of breath taken when waiting, when watching. You press your palm flat. The stone does not give, but it listens. Do you remember the first structure that ever made you feel small? Not in size, in time. A place that held stories too large to fit in your voice. This is that feeling again. The arch towers without effort. It does not claim power. It wears it, like a memory worn smooth from repetition. You circle around it, slowly. On the far side, a shape carved into the ground. Not recent, not sharp. Worn down until it resembles nothing specific. A symbol once, perhaps, or a mark of placement, of purpose. You kneel beside it, touch the stone. Warmer here, not from sun, from within. The breath continues, steady, patient. You speak a name aloud, not yours. You don't know whose. The sound barely escapes your lips before the air swallows it whole. But something shifts. A thread of warmth travels from the stone, up your arm, into your chest. It doesn't stop your heart. It mirrors it. For a moment, the beat isn't yours alone. You step beneath the arch. No gate, no door, just space. And something waiting in it. A pressure, a presence, not malevolent, not kind, just aware. You close your eyes. The breath behind the stone moves forward. It does not touch you. It becomes you, wraps around your lungs, settles behind your eyes. You inhale, and the air is not air. It's dust and memory and the scent of extinguished lamps. Oil long since gone cold, pages turned and burned, stone warmed once by hands you'll never know. You see flashes, brief and jarring, a torch raised in rain, the scrape of metal against earth, a figure kneeling before the arch with blood on their fingers, a whisper, cut short. You don't know what it means, but the ache it leaves in your bones feels familiar. Do you remember when you realized ruins could remember you? That a place abandoned still held breath enough to speak if you listened slowly? You step out again. The wind has changed. The grass no longer folds beneath your feet. It leans toward you, just slightly. You walk away, but the pressure stays in your ribs. A second breath, a memory tucked into your lungs. Not yours, not entirely. And when you reach the ridge, you turn back, not to check, to thank it. The arch does not move, but the crack seems wider, as if it too had exhaled. You didn't notice the trees at first. They arrived gradually, low and gnarled, roots crawling across the slope like fingers searching for something buried. Their bark was split, not from age alone, from memory too. These are not young trees, nor old. They are outside of that, timeless in the way scars are timeless. You brush your fingers along one trunk and the dust clings to your skin, gray and bunnying and warm. Ash. The grove is quiet, but not the soft quiet of sleep, the held breath quiet of aftermath. No birds, no insects, no leaves rustling, just stillness, thick and deliberate. You walk slower here, your boots make no sound. The earth is too soft beneath you, too yielding. Something is beneath the soil, something that listens. You pause at the center, a circle of flattened ground, not marked, not dug, just pressed down, like something once heavy stood here for a long time and then vanished. The air smells of char, faint but persistent, like a fire long ago, the kind that burns clean and leaves behind only questions. Do you remember the first time you saw a place that remembered pain better than joy? The way it didn't ache, it just waited. This grove waits like that. It doesn't reach toward the sun. It leans inward, protective or ashamed. You kneel. The ash is deeper here. You scoop a small handful, let it sift through your fingers. It falls too slowly, almost like it's reluctant. Some of it sticks to your skin, not from moisture, from memory. You brush your hands clean and it stays anyway. Faint streaks like shadow runes across your palms. In the stillness, a hum, low, beneath hearing. You feel it more than register it, a vibration in your spine, a pull behind your sternum, something calling not to your ears, to your blood. You open your pack, unwrap the leather. The red mark pulses softly now, as if warmed by the place. You lay it flat on the ash. It settles as though it's been there before. You do not touch it. You do not speak. The grove responds. The wind returns, barely, just enough to stir a single curl of dust around the mark. It swirls once, then disappears. And then the air holds its breath again. You reach for the leather, but your hand stops halfway. There's something in the silence now, not sound, not presence, a knowing. You've been here, not in this life, but in one that wore your shape. You feel the echo rise behind your ribs. You hear your own voice say a word you don't understand. You watch your own fingers drop something small and black into the ash. A ring, a tooth, a seed. The vision fades, but the ache stays. You press your hand to the ground. Ash gives way to warmth. The soil breathes upward, not a gust, a sigh. You close your eyes. Do you remember the scent of a par before the flame? That mix of oil and cloth and reverence? This grove remembers. It has no flame now, but the embers, they wait. And as you rise, the wind lifts behind you, gentle, carrying with it the faintest sound. Not a whisper, not a cry. A name you've never spoken, but one that was always yours. You've never seen it, but you've carried it for years, folded tight, weightless in your chest, pressed just behind the place where breath becomes meaning. It isn't written on paper, not inked, not signed, but it exists. You know it. Like a thought half formed, a whisper paused at the edge of speech, waiting for the silence to soften just enough. You feel it again as you descend into the hollow. The wind doesn't follow you. The trees grow denser, bark stripped in curling lines as if something had tried to write its way into their skin. You run your hand across one trunk, smooth, cold, and beneath the surface, an impression, not carved, pressed, as if the letter inside you once leaned against this place and left behind its pulse. The earth dips here, slopes like a breath drawn in, and in the center, a flat stone, unremarkable, lichen-covered, but wrong. Not because it doesn't belong, because it remembers too well. You kneel, your knees sink slightly into the moss. The stone is warm and waiting. You don't know why, but you press your palm to your chest, right where the letter lives. It stirs. Do you remember the first time you wrote something and never sent it? A message meant only for air, for ash, for no one, and still it mattered? That's what this is. A letter not sent, but still received, still carried, still binding. You close your eyes and feel the edges of it. Not words, shapes, memories bent into language. There's a name inside, not yours. A place, long lost. A promise, maybe broken, maybe kept too long. Your breath stutters. You lie back. The stone supports your shoulders, your head. You feel it beneath your spine, not cold, resonant, like it's reading you. And the letter, it begins to unfold, not in thought, in sensation. A night under torchlight, oil smoke thick in your throat. A voice behind you that never touched your name. A hand brushing your arm, calloused and certain, then gone. A fire, a map, a decision made by silence. And in the silence, the feeling of weight, something placed in your chest, not by force, by trust. A message, meant to be carried. You open your eyes, you are alone, but you've never felt less abandoned. You reach into your pack, pull out the leather again. The red mark doesn't burn now. It glows, dim, steady. You press it gently to your chest, right over the place where the letter rests. Something shifts, soft, internal, like dust lifting from a sealed box, like breath returning after too long held. You murmur something, not aloud, inside, and the letter answers, not in words, in warmth. You stand. The grove is still silent, but not empty. You carry it with you again. The message, the memory, the weight that isn't weight, the letter behind your ribs. You do not read it, but you know one day someone will. You hear them long before you see the path. Soft, deliberate, fading. Not echoes, imprints. Sound left behind like dust on stone. Only audible if you walk slow enough. Only recognizable if your own steps match their rhythm. You stop. You listen. The hush between each footfall isn't silence. It's waiting. You take another step and the cadence shifts slightly. as though you've joined something already in motion. The terrain here is broken, not by time, but by indecision. Stones arranged in patterns that almost form a road, then fracture, scatter, disappear. Grass grows in the waves, dry and gray, not dead, just tired. It crunches faintly beneath your boots, and you flinch, as if you've spoken out of turn. The footsteps pause, then resume, but slower. Do you remember the sound your mother's shoes made down the hall before you slept? That almost song of retreat, comforting not because she stayed, but because her rhythm meant the world was still turning. These steps remind you of that, but heavier, more final, as if the one who walked before you never came back, or never meant to. Ahead, something rises through the mist. Not a wall, not a tower, a suggestion of structure, a threshold with no shape. You approach slowly. The steps ahead of you vanish as you draw near. The ground flattens. The dust lifts slightly with each move, like memory made visible. Then, the gate, or where it should be. Two stone pillars, broken at different heights, stand at uneven distance. Between them, only space. No arch, no seal, just air. Still, your breath catches. You know it's a gate. Not because of what's there, because of what isn't. The space feels watched, not by a person, by time. You step closer. The air thickens, just slightly, like walking into the pause of a sentence never finished. You reach toward one pillar. The stone is smooth on one side, jagged on the other, and cold. The kind of cold that feels like forgetting. You trace its edge. Your fingertip stings, but leaves no mark. Something inside the stone resists recognition. You glance to the other pillar, a smear of dark. Faint. You rub it with your sleeve and it clears just enough to reveal a shape. Not a symbol. A heel. Pressed into the rock, upside down, as though someone once stood on air. Or fell through it. You whisper a name. Not your own. The air does not answer. You reach into your cloak. The leather, once rigid, now feels softer. Familiar. It breathes with you, expands and contracts slightly as if sinking. You do not unwrap it, you hold it gently, cradle it, and for the first time you wonder if it was always meant to be carried here. Do you remember the place you were never allowed to enter? The one you dreamed of anyway? A locked door, a hall turned away, a room at the top of stairs that never creaked. This feels like that. But the lock is not physical. It's something deeper, a question you've never dared finish. You take one more step toward the gate, and the footsteps stop, not suddenly, not sharply. They just end, as though they have reached a line, and beyond that line, nothing walks, not even you. You stop too. The leather in your hand tightens briefly, like a heartbeat. You do not pass through. You bow your head, not in surrender, in memory, and then you turn. The wind does not blow, but something cold wraps around your ankles as you leave, not to pull you back, to remind you. This was never your gate, but it has waited for you all the same. You don't know where it comes from. One moment your palms are empty. The next, they're covered. A thin sheen, soft, luminous, warm. Not glittering like treasure, not harsh like sand. Finer than ash, gentler than soil. You rub your fingers together and it clings. Not stubbornly, tenderly, like it knows you. There's no trail behind you. No pouch spilled, no glow in the grass. Only your hands, only the dust. It smells faintly of heat, of summer light on stone, and something older, like dried honey in sun-bleached parchment. You hold them up, let the sun filter through the trees and catch the shimmer. The light bends differently where the dust lies, as if each mote remembers fire. You kneel, press your palms into the ground. It doesn't transfer. The earth remains dark, unchanged. The gold stays with you, not painted, not powdered, inherited. Do you remember the first time someone gave you something precious and you didn't know how to carry it? A coin, a locket, a secret. Something small that made your hands feel heavier than they ever had. That's what this is. Only no one gave it to you. It rose. From skin, from memory, from the moment just before waking. You stand slowly. Every movement stirs the dust slightly, but it doesn't fall. It moves with you. You step forward. A grove opens ahead, half lit, dappled in bronze. The air tastes like old breath and candle smoke. Sweet, ancient. The trees are smooth here, as if wind has worn away every roughness. You reach for one, and where your fingertips touch, the bark glows faintly. Not bright, but warm. A reaction. Recognition. You step carefully through the grove. Each time you brush a leaf or stone, that glow answers back. Not in light, in memory. You begin to see them, not people. Impressions. Shapes bent over parchment, fingers sliding across blades, hands clasped in farewell, all covered in the same dust. You are not the first to carry it. You reach a circle of stones, flat, arranged like seats. Each one bears a handprint, some larger, some smaller, all faint, all gold. You place your palm on one, it fits too well. The warmth rises, not into your skin, but into your breath. Your next exhale feels heavier, like it carries a story you haven't read yet. You sit, and the dust begins to shift. Not away, inward. It sinks into your skin, into the creases of your fingers, into the lines in your palms, as if it's remembering you. Not claiming, not consuming, recognizing. Do you remember the last time you touched something and knew it was sacred? You reach for the leather. It hums, faintly. The red mark pulses once, then quiets, and from its edge, a shimmer, the same dust, rising slowly, curling around your wrist, forming a thin band of gold that tightens briefly, then disappears. You breathe. You understand nothing, and yet you feel ready. The grove darkens just slightly. A cloud passes, or maybe the light folds back in on itself. You stand. Your hands are empty again, but your fingers shine, not with dust, with memory. You come to it at dusk, not by plan, not by path. The light folds differently through the trees here, long and slanted, brushing gold across the ruins like apology. Stone columns rise around you like ribs, half shattered, leaning inward, as if trying to shield something that no longer needs protection. The ground is uneven, littered with fallen leaves and fragments of marble veined with age, and at the center, half sunk in the earth, a chair, a seat, a throne. You pause. It is not regal, not grand. The back is broken. One arm is missing, but it still commands the space. The moss around its base does not touch it. The shadows fall just short. Nothing dares grow on the stone itself. You approach with bare feet now, your boots left behind somewhere in the last silence. The soil here is soft but not forgiving. Each step sinks deeper than it should. The air tightens as you draw near. Not from magic, from memory. You kneel beside it, lay a hand on the seat, cold. And yet, the moment your skin meets the surface, you feel it. The breath behind the throne. Not waiting, not reaching, just remembering. Do you remember the last time you sat in a place you didn't earn? A chair too large, a silence too loud, a weight that didn't belong to your name? The stone answers with its own silence, not empty, full, of decisions made in corners, of orders whispered and swallowed, of a name worn smooth from being spoken to often, and then not at all. You sit, not fully, just enough to feel its memory. Something shifts in your chest. A tightness, long familiar, loosens. You inhale, and the throne exhales. A gust of wind circles the ruins. It doesn't disturb the dust, but you hear it move through the hollow bones of the pillars. A low tone, like a question never answered. You reach into your cloak. The leather hums now, warm in your hands. You place it on your lap, unopened, and wait. The ground does not tremble. The air does not stir again. But beneath you the stone breathes. It rises imperceptibly as though remembering what it once held. Images bloom behind your eyes. Not dreams, not prophecy, memory. A hand draped in crimson. A figure leaning forward, face never clear. A crowd, silent not from fear, from reverence. You feel the weight of something in your left palm. You cannot see it, but you know its power, and you know you never wanted it. The vision fades, the warmth lingers. You stand. The throne makes no sound, But you feel the loss as soon as you rise, like a candle snuffed too quickly. The leather, now heavier, is slung back into your pack. It carries more than before. Not items, not weight. Meaning, you do not look back. But in your spine, you feel the curve up through your curve of that chair. In your ribs, the silence it taught you. And in your breath, the truth. Some thrones are meant to be abandoned, not because they are broken, but because they remember too much. You find it in a place you weren't seeking, down a narrow corridor carved by no architect, where the walls lean close enough to hush your shoulders, where sound walks with a limp and even your breath forgets its name. The passage spirals slightly, downward, like memory threading a needle you cannot see. You place your hand against the right wall, smooth stone, worn by more than weather. Fingers once dragged here, hands once braced here. They were not afraid, but they knew. At the end, no door, no threshold, just a narrowing. You slip sideways through, body angled, spine curved as though bowing to a silence older than shape. And then, the light. It flickers before you fully see it. A single flame, not dancing, not wavering. Breathing, nestled inside a bowl of hammered bronze that rests on a ledge, carved directly from the wall. Beneath it, nothing. No offering, no dust. Just space that remains undisturbed, as though the air itself has been trained not to settle here. The oil lamp is unguarded, unadorned, and alive. You step forward. The flame does not change, but the air thickens slightly. A hush blooms behind your ears. Your heartbeat slows, not from fear, but from reverence. You kneel, not because you mean to, because your body understands what your mind does not. This place requires stillness. Do you remember the first time you saw something small that carried a weight too vast to measure? A ring, a lock of hair, a child's drawing, things that pulse not with power, with presence. This lamp is one of them. It does not burn bright. It does not illuminate the walls, but it lights something within you, a hallway you'd sealed shut, a room you'd never entered. You sit. The flame leans slightly toward you, not pulled by breath, drawn by recognition. You reach into your cloak. The leather, always quiet until now, grows warm, hot almost, but not in warning, in urgency. You unwrap it with care, lay the red mark beside the lamp. The flame responds, it bows, and in that motion, a sound. Not from the flame, from the stone beneath it. A crack, long-healed, exhales a single note, like the sigh of a sealed room opening in the dark. The memory arrives unbidden. You are holding a lamp. Your hands are shaking. Someone places theirs over yours, steadying. Their voice is low, and though the words are lost, you remember the warmth behind them. And then they say nothing, they only wait. And in that waiting, you realize the flame is not past, it is remembered, kept, not given. You return to yourself. The lamp is as it was, but the flame leans a little further. You lift your palm and show it. The mark glows faintly, and the flame bends forward. Once, twice, and steadies. You do not touch it, but you understand. The lamp is not eternal because of oil, not because of design. It continues because it is remembered, because someone has always returned, to watch, to listen, to wait. You gather the leather again, wrap it slowly. The warmth lingers longer this time, as though the flame has taken something from you, or left something behind. You rise, you do not turn your back. You walk backward through the narrowing, one step at a time, eyes on the light, until it is gone, and yet somehow still with you. The air sharpens before you see it, a bite behind your teeth, a prickle at the edge of each breath, like frost threading into your lungs. You stop, exhale slowly. The mist escapes your lips like memory departing, not sudden, not reluctant. The path ahead rises slightly, scattered with loose stones and silver lichen, until it vanishes into a thin veil of white snow, or what remains of it. The world hushes here, not into silence but into stillness, a kind that precedes something or follows it. You climb. Each step crunches faintly, not into ice, into dust that once knew snow. The wind touches your cheeks, Cold but not cruel. It carries no scent, only quiet. Do you remember the last time you were cold and didn't want warmth? When the chill made you feel more real, more whole, like you could finally hear yourself think? You reach the ridge. There's nothing here. And everything. The land spreads below like a forgotten breath, valleys and ridges soft with age. No battle remains, no camp. But beneath the white crusts and stone bones, the earth feels heavy with footsteps. You close your eyes, they return. Not sounds, impressions. A boot pressing into slush, a banner falling, a hand lifted, not in command. In farewell, you kneel, and beneath your knee, something shifts. A patch of snow capes slightly. You brush it away and uncover, not stone, not bone, a groove, circular, worn into the ground, as if something once sat here in heavy, constant. You trace the edge. It's faint, but deliberate. A basin? A fire ring? You don't know, but the air around it holds heat. Faint, oh, like a story still smoldering. You reach into your cloak. The leather hums. Not warm, steady. You unwrap it. The red mark pulses once, and for the first time, the snow does not resist it. It sinks slightly into the groove, like it remembers its place, like it has come home. You sit beside it, not waiting, witnessing. From the ridge, the world does not respond. But in the quiet, a tone forms. Not a song, not speech. A long, low resonance behind your ribs. The kind of sound stone makes when it mourns something no one else recalls. You bow your head, and the mark grows still. The vision begins. A mountain pass, wind tearing at faces, eyes narrowed against white glare. A voice, yours, calling something no one hears. Then a silence, deep. And then the sound of breath in snow, slow, deliberate, refusing to stop. You open your eyes, the mark does not glow, it rests. You rewrap it, carefully. Do you remember the moment when surrender didn't feel like failure, but completion? You rise, snow has begun to fall. Quiet, sparse. It melts on your skin like memory. You take one step back, then another, the wind stirs slightly. No more footsteps sound, only your breath, only the hush, only the final echo before the snow. You don't see it at first. It follows you in the shape of trees, in the bend of rocks, in the dim hush of your own footsteps softening on moss, but it's always there. Not looming, not hiding, just walking slightly behind and to the left, as if respectful, as if patient. The path winds now, not forward, inward, into a spiral of tall stones set like teeth, each one cracked, lichen-covered, yet warm to the touch when you pass. There's no light here but the one you carry inside, and even that flickers. Your breath feels distant, your bones quieter than usual. You pass a boulder, your fingers brush its edge, and there, a shimmer, brief. Your shadow hesitates while you move on. You stop, turn, and it pauses with you. It's not your shape, not fully, taller or bent. Your limbs but echoed, your head but slightly tilted, as if listening. You lift your hand, it mirrors, but slower. You step forward, it stays still, and then it steps too. Not menacing, mourning, you speak no words, but the space between you and the shadow thickens. It is not a presence, it is not a threat. It is you, or the part of you that walked alone all those years. The part that carried memory when your heart could not. The part that whispered your name when no one else would. You kneel. The earth is soft here, warmer, as if this spot was once fire and has never forgotten. You place your hand on the moss. The red mark beneath your cloak pulses. The leather unwraps easily this time, like it knew, like it's ready. You set it down. The shadow does not move, but you feel it draw closer. A wind stirs behind you, but no leaves shift. No trees creak. The air bends only around your skin, pressing like a breath that never finishes. The red mark glows. The ground hums faintly, just enough to remind you, you are seen. Do you remember the last time someone called your name and meant it? You whisper it now, not aloud, inward. The mark dims. The shadow steps closer. Now it kneels, not in imitation and joining. It reaches for the leather, but your hand arrives first. You both touch it, and it becomes warm, like something long locked returning to its pulse. Then slowly the shadow leans into yours. Not over, not behind, into, as if threading itself back into your shape. It does not hurt. It simply, remembers. You rise and now your steps feel fuller, not heavier, but whole. The path ends here or begins. You don't know, but you do not turn. You do not look back. You walk forward, and the shadow walks with you. No longer a fragment, but a name. Yours. You lie down now. Not on stone, not on moss, on the memory of where you've been, the paths you walked, the whispers you gathered, the weight you carried without knowing. They do not press upon you, they cradle. The wind has settled. The trees have forgotten how to sway. Even your breath, once cautious and steady, now drifts slower, quieter, as if the world around you has found its rhythm in your sleep. Do you remember the first time stillness didn't feel like absence? The last flicker of the oil lamp lingers behind your eyes. Not a flame, but a hush. You carry no map now, no mark, only warmth. Only the shape of a name whispered too gently to echo. Your thoughts unspool like thread in water. One by one they dissolve, into calm, into nothing, into rest. You are not alone, Bisham. The dust remembers your hands. The stone remembers your silence. And somewhere, far from this moment, or perhaps just beneath it, the shadow that once followed you has curled at your side, breathing, still, waiting for no one, and nothing more. Sleep now. The journey does not end. It only hushes until you are ready again.